The Akron, built at a cost of over £1 million, man's greatest attempt to conquer the air, is no more.
The USS Akron was not just an airship, it was a flying aircraft carrier that defied the laws of aviation in the 1930s. At nearly 800 feet long, it was a titan of the skies, designed to project power anywhere in the world. But deep within its massive frame, a silent, invisible flaw was waiting to strike. It wasn't an enemy missile or a mechanical failure that doomed it. It was a misunderstanding of basic physics that we are still trying to fully comprehend today. And when the end came, it happened so fast that history almost missed the warning signs entirely. The Leviathan of the Clouds. It is hard to wrap your head around just how massive the USS Akron actually was. We are talking about a structure that measured 785 feet from nose to tail. To put that into perspective, that is only slightly shorter than the Titanic, but this thing was designed to float in the sky. It was a flying city, a technological marvel that made everyone who saw it stop and stare in disbelief. But here is the catch. The Akron was not just a big balloon, it was a rigid airship, meaning it had a massive skeleton made of aluminum alloy rings and longitudinal girders. Inside this skeleton were 12 giant gas cells filled with helium, the gas that gave it lift. But the real showstopper was what was hiding inside the belly of this beast. The Akron was a flying aircraft carrier. It had an internal hangar bay that could hold up to 5 F-9C Sparrowhawk biplanes. These weren't just strapped to the outside, they were launched and recovered while the airship was in flight using a trapeze system. A hook on the top of the plane would catch a bar hanging from the airship, and then the plane would be hoisted inside. It sounds like science fiction or something you would see in a superhero movie, but this was real life in the early 1930s. The engineering behind this trapeze system was mind-blowing. The pilot had to match the speed of the airship perfectly, flying into the turbulent wake just behind the hangar door. It required nerves of steel. One wrong move and the propeller would slice into the airship's fragile skin, or the plane would tumble out of the sky. The fact that they pulled this off repeatedly is a testament to the skill of those pilots. They were called the men on the trapeze, and they were the rock stars of the Navy. The U.S. Navy had bet everything on this technology. They believed that these giant scouts could patrol the vast Pacific Ocean, launching their fighter planes to spot enemy fleets long before they could threaten the American coast. It was a bold vision. Hands down, it was the most ambitious aviation project of the era. But ambition often blinds you to reality. There were wild theories even back then that a ship of this size was simply too fragile to handle the violent forces of nature. Some people believed the design was actually stolen or reverse-engineered from German plans that the Americans didn't fully understand. The Germans were the masters of Zeppelins, but even they had never built a flying aircraft carrier like this. Rumors swirled that the stress calculations were based on ideal conditions, not the chaotic reality of an Atlantic storm. It was like building a bridge that could only stand up on a sunny day. Think about it. You have a structure as long as a skyscraper, but it is lighter than air. It has to endure wind shear, updrafts, and downdrafts that pull the nose up while pushing the tail down. The stress on the frame is unimaginable, and that is putting it lightly. The engineers knew they were pushing the limits of material science. They used a new alloy called duralumin, which was light and strong, but it had its limits. It was prone to fatigue, invisible cracks that could spread over time. What most people don't realize is that the Akron had already had a few close calls before its final flight. It had damaged its lower fin during a ground handling accident, and there were whispers among the crew that the ship handled sluggishly in rough air. It was a beast to fly. It didn't respond quickly like a plane. You had to anticipate the turn seconds, sometimes minutes, before it happened. And get this, there was another secret feature that added to the danger. The spy basket. This was a small, bullet-shaped capsule that could be lowered from the bottom of the airship on a long tether. The idea was that the Akron could hide in the clouds above, while a lone observer was lowered thousands of feet below the cloud layer to spy on enemy ships. The observer would hang there, dangling in the void, communicating by telephone. It was terrifying. Some sailors claimed that being in the spy basket felt like being bait on a fishing line for some massive sky predator. The sheer scale of the operation required a crew of nearly 90 men to operate at full capacity. They lived inside the hull, walking along narrow catwalks called keels, surrounded by the humming of the 8 gasoline engines and the creaking of the metal frame. It was a loud, cold, and dangerous world. But for the men of the Akron, it was the future. They were the pioneers of the sky. But there was a variable they hadn't fully accounted for. A physical problem that goes beyond just engineering. It involves the atmosphere itself. When you take an object of that volume and push it through a rapidly changing weather system, strange things start to happen. The air pressure changes around the ship were not uniform, and this is where the mystery begins to deepen. We tend to think of air as just empty space, but for an airship, air is a fluid just like water. And this fluid was about to turn against them in a way they never expected. Some conspiracy theorists have suggested that the spy basket was used for more than just looking for ships. There are stories that the Navy was testing experimental listening devices, trying to pick up signals from sources that shouldn't exist. Was the Akron hunting for something other than enemy fleets? We may never know. The stage was set for a disaster, but nobody on board knew it yet. They were confident in their machine. They trusted the math. But as we all know, nature has a way of exposing the flaws in our calculations. The Akron was a masterpiece of human ingenuity, but it was also a ticking time bomb waiting for the wrong set of conditions. And unfortunately, those conditions were gathering just off the coast of New Jersey. But the real danger wasn't just the wind, it was something the pilots couldn't even see. Into the eye of the storm. It was the evening of April 3rd, 1933. The mission seemed simple enough. The Akron was scheduled to fly from its base in Lakehurst, New Jersey, to the coast of New England to calibrate radio direction-finding stations. It sounds like a routine, boring task for such a mighty warship. But from the moment they cast off the mooring mast, things felt wrong. A weather front was moving in, and not just any front. This was a violent system, a line of thunderstorms that was churning up the Atlantic coast. The air was heavy and unstable. Fog was rolling in, thick and blinding. Visibility was dropping by the minute. Any modern pilot would have grounded the flight immediately. But back then, weather forecasting was still in its infancy. They didn't have radar. They didn't have satellite imagery. They relied on basic reports and looking out the window. Admiral William Moffett, the biggest supporter of the airship program and a high-ranking officer, was on board as a guest. His presence added a layer of pressure. You don't want to cancel a flight when the boss is watching. Moffett was a legend. He had staked his entire career on the idea that airships were superior to airplanes for long-range scouting. If the Akron failed, his legacy failed. So the commander, Frank McCord, ordered the ship to launch. As the massive engines roared to life, the Akron rose into the gloom. Almost immediately, they ran into trouble. The fog was so dense they couldn't see the ground. They were flying blind, relying entirely on their instruments. And get this, the air was becoming incredibly turbulent. The giant ship was being tossed around like a toy. We are talking about thousands of tons of metal and gas being shoved upward and downward by invisible hands. The crew fought the controls. The elevator man, who controlled the pitch of the ship, was sweating, trying to keep the Akron level. But the ship was responding slowly. It felt heavy, lethargic. The lightning started to flash around them, illuminating the dark ocean below in terrifying bursts. The passengers and crew must have known this was bad. There is a wild theory that the lightning wasn't just weather. Some researchers of the paranormal have suggested that the Akron flew directly into a localized electromagnetic anomaly. Witnesses on the ground reported seeing balls of fire or St. Elmo's fire dancing along the huge metal skeleton of the ship before it went down. Could this electrical charge have interfered with the control cables? Or worse, did it scramble the minds of the crew? It sounds crazy, but in high-stress situations involving massive electrical fields, pilots have reported hallucinations and time distortion. Here is where the situation gets critical. The captain decided to head out to sea thinking he could fly around the storm. It was a standard tactic. Go east, get away from the coast, and find smoother air. But he didn't realize the size of the system he was dealing with. He wasn't flying around the storm, he was flying directly into the most dangerous part of it.